Hello, Hare Krishna. My name is Jvalamukhi. This is video number 11 in the J File series, my video blog of the book that I've written called My Hoo-Hoo and the Destiny of the Universe, the Great Golden Age, the Great Sinister Movement, and the Fire Walk of a Hare Krishna Kid. It is 5:15 on a Saturday morning, and I'm picking up this video where I had to leave off the other day when my kids woke up and interrupted the recording, so it's not in a proper ending section, but if you can bear with me with a little repetition, I will pick up where I left off. Essentially what I was trying to describe in video number 10 was the understanding that I got through the experience of my first real exorcism. Growing up, I was always very sensitive to the presence of other entities around and struggled with, I don't know exactly what they call it, I think it's sleep paralysis, something like that. And then over the years, I understood that that phenomenon, as well as my sensitivity to other entities, was something that I had to deal with. And as I began the healing process, I realized just how incredible Krishna's creation is, in that the layers of our coverings are personal. And so you can refer to them as the personified modes of the material nature, as in passion, ignorance, and goodness, or they can be seen as separate living entities, in which case sometimes they are, or ghosts, hobgoblins, demons, etc., etc. And then sometimes, other subtle beings. There are more subtle beings than there are physical beings. And this isn't usually talked about in Krishna consciousness. It's all over throughout the scriptures about these things, but the practical application of how to become uncovered or get free of the influence of those things was my practical experience, and I'm sharing that with you here. So again, I read this paragraph, I think, twice before at the end of the last video as the girls were waking up. And I will pick it up on this video in case you're starting from the beginning there. So what has just happened was that my experience of the first separate entity, my first experience of an exorcism was there, and reflecting on it, these are my thoughts. The embodied have more power than the disembodied, and like it or not, the disembodied have to go when you order them out. Of course, that also depends on the purity of the one ordering, and how ready the person whom they inhabit is to let them go. If the person whom the spirit is attached to chooses to maintain denial, the spirit or covering layer does not leave. It remains as a gatekeeper or guardian, as I call them. They block consciousness. We want to forget. They oblige and block memory and awareness. Of course, there is a price to be paid for their services. This usually manifests as some kind of dysfunction, mental dysfunction or physical dysfunction, or both, and turns into chronic illness, even leading to death. Most people would prefer to die rather than face their stuff. It takes a lot of courage and support to face oneself, especially when there is not sufficient shelter. That is why knowledge of the Absolute is essential. This realized knowledge provides the platform of safety from which one can venture into the depths of the soul and lay it all down. I'm going to just pause there and begin to talk about how we as spiritual aspirants begin to lay down our coverings. And until and unless there is a safe environment, we clothe ourselves with all of our coverings and our patterns and our walls. And it's just, how to survive here in this place. But when there's a sense of safety, and that safety has to come from realized knowledge of your connection with God, and usually some safe person or facilitator to help you walk that path. And then you can explore your own consciousness and begin to let go of the things that no longer serve you, or actually be yourself instead of the symptoms of the trauma drama that we've lived through in the material world. And everybody in the material world is dealing with trauma. Everybody. It's just a traumatizing place. Look out in nature all day long. Everybody's eating each other. And that doesn't change when you get to the human form of life. So spiritual life and healing are really synonymous. We can't artificially transcend without going through the healing process. And that means feeling. If you're not willing to feel, you cannot heal. And you have to begin with very brutal self-honesty and be willing to look at those places that aren't so pretty, that are painful. And generally we're defensive about those places. But when you're able to get past that in a place of ultimate vulnerability, to go inside, that's when real shift begins and real relief begins. So where was I? All right. Okay. So you need sufficient shelter. And that is why knowledge of the absolute is absolutely essential. The realized knowledge provides the platform of safety from which one can venture into the depths of the soul and lay it all down. The reward of peace and blissful relationship with the Lord are well worth the endeavor. There are some books out there that attribute a large percentage of mental illness to, quote, entities or ghosts. After my personal experiences, I lean towards accepting this truth. Of course, whether one refers to these phenomena as spirits, ETs, covering layers, or energies, ultimately, everything in the Lord's creation is personal and has personality. It doesn't really matter what they are in one sense, only that the lesson is learned and that one progresses in their march towards self-realization and love of God. And then again, of letting go of that covering. Modern society bases its understanding of a person on what kind of physical cells they are made of, DNA, brain waves, and the like. If they can't test or prove it, it is not real in their eyes. This is the ruling attitude, a materialistic one. However, as long back as civilization goes, stories of ghostly beings are always told. Whether modern science can qualify or quantify these phenomena, people accept what they experience, and I did too. There is absolutely no denying it. I just find it so interesting that the science world has so much to say about, this is the way it is, we're the authority, but when faced with the paranormal, suddenly they're like, I don't know. And that to me just turns the whole thing on its head. There's so many things that they can't say, and yet they still claim to be authoritative. So this next quote is from Srila Prabhupada, Krishna Consciousness, the Matchless Gift. The aim of this Krishna Consciousness movement is to bring all living entities back to their original consciousness. All living entities within the material world are, to varying degrees, afflicted with a type of madness. This Krishna Consciousness movement aims at curing man of his material disease and re-establishing his original consciousness. In a Bengali poem, a great Vaishnava poet has written, "When a man is haunted by ghosts, he can only speak nonsense. Similarly, anyone who is under the influence of material nature should be considered haunted, and whatever he speaks should be considered nonsense. One may be considered a great philosopher or great scientist, but if he is haunted by the ghost of Maya, illusion, whatever he theorizes and whatever he speaks is more or less nonsensical." Today, we are given the example of a psychiatrist who, when requested to examine a murderer, proclaimed that since all of the patients with whom he had come in contact were more or less crazy, the court could excuse the murderer on those grounds if it so desired. The point is that in the material world, it is very difficult to find a sane living entity. The prevailing atmosphere of insanity in this world is all caused by the infection of material consciousness. Gift number 4. The power to change the world. To rebuild a better world, the old faulty foundation has to be replaced. My foundation crumbles, and my world falls apart. Never in a million years would I have believed anyone if they had come up to me and told me that I had been horrifically sexually abused. In fact, my mother's story was that my father had always whisked us away just in the nick of time when we had lived in different communities where abuse had surfaced later on in our, later after we left that place. I remember riding in a car with 2 of my friends back in 2003. We had come together from different states with a cast of 15 or so, working on a drama called Burnt Laddu. It chronicled one young man's experience in the Vrindavan, India Gurukul, the boys' boarding school in the 1980s. One of the main characters in the drama, who had been beaten and abused as a child, ends up killing himself after abusing another young boy himself. The play ends with the now grown-up children finding the abuser from the past, beating him up, and then putting the pieces of their lives back together and praying to Krishna. The hurts and misunderstandings of their parents' generation hint at coming to light. The prayer is that the first and second generation of Vaishnava, devotees of Vishnu, begin to work together to make things right, the way they were supposed to be. This play made quite a stir in ISKCON, and we were told that even the governing body commission, the GBC, members were asked to watch the recording of it. Most of the audience was moved to tears, most touched by the too close to home story. The writer of the play was driving the car, and the director was in the passenger seat, and I was in the back seat. They were talking about the subject of the play and some of the hard feelings that they themselves have to deal with because of similar experiences in their own childhoods growing up in the organization. I told them, I'm sorry for what you both have been through, but I was very happy growing up in ISKCON. I was never abused. I had so many positive impressions of spiritual life. And again, I was never abused because insert family story here. Dad always protected us. The next heading is the amazing survival features of the body: self-preservation, repression, denial, and the honest body. This was written in February of 2011. This latest journal entry has taken a while to enter. Unconsciously, I have been putting it off. Even now, my stomach is doing little flips at the prospect of putting to ink these memories. I am alone. It is 2:44 a.m. The boys and everyone are sleeping. Instead of starting my morning japa, my prayers, I am writing. Mahaprabhu asked me what issues I came in to work on. I wanted to work on my candida that has been causing me issues since my youngest son was born. The pain and the burning in my vagina that just won't go away. That was 2 years ago. I had the same problem after my second child's birth for almost a year until I cured it using clay. This time, however, nothing seems to be effective. It seems there is some lesson the body is showing me, wanting me to pay attention to learn. It is Krishna's way. I wanted to get to the energetic cause of it, the emotional cause of it, as all disease is caused first on the spiritual, then emotional level, to then finally manifest as physical maladies. Here is another song that I've inserted here. It is called Pain is a Teacher. Pain is a teacher, a teacher, a teacher. Pain is a teacher, a wise old man. Pain is a teacher, a teacher, a teacher. Pain is a teacher, a wise old man. He says, don't go down that road again. Listen well to what he has to tell you. Listen well to what he has to say. The day you listen well, your pain will go away. Listen to me, hear my words, learn from me, spiritual ABC. Dehinosmin yata dehe, kaumaram yovanam jara, tata dehantara praptir, dhiras tatra namuyati. Listen, listen. When will you listen? Bhagavad Gita, 2nd chapter, verse 13, 1972 version. As the embodied soul continually passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. The self-realized soul is not bewildered by such a change. End quote. Anyway, as I lay on the table, my body almost instantly began to twitch and my abdomen to contract and hips to do their strange kind of undulation, one side jerking kind of motion. Kamra asked me some question in regards to my fear or aversion of being intimate with my husband. Normally our sessions are completely silent, and every now and then she'll ask a clarifying question, or for me to begin to get some clarity on something that is coming up for me. I replied that I didn't want intimacy. He wanted intimacy. I was completely frigid. When I said this out loud, I felt my body go into a shivering fit of abdominal contractions. It was hard to keep my head on the session pillow, the session table on the pillow. Kamra directed me to breathe deeply and go deeper, beyond the feeling of frigidity. Then the tears began to come. In my inner vision, I was a 2-year-old little blonde girl in the blue bathroom with the big white wooden drawers built in. It was on our house on Piper Street in Detroit. Kamra asked me some questions. What is happening? The rush of tears and a helpless wail escaped my mouth. Yucky daddy, yucky daddy, yucky daddy. Even as I write these words, my stomach ties in a knot. I kept repeating these words in a voice of a little 2-year-old girl. With broken words, I told the adult what had happened. My father took me into the bathroom. Mommy was not home. He wanted to change my diaper. It was a cloth diaper. I was reluctant. I didn't want him to. He forced me to do it, picked me up, and with Vaseline on his fingers, he, parentheses, now I am really having tummy salts. My stomach is going around and round. He, ... he hurt me. There, I said it. Phew, that was hard. I've always remembered crying loudly and trying to get away while he held me. I kicked the top drawer hard. The Vaseline was in the cupboard above this drawer. He was getting very, very angry that I was crying and screaming so loudly. Usually I would have been afraid, but I was fighting with everything I had. I was 2, and it wasn't enough. He told my mother when she returned that I was upset because he had to put ointment on my infection, my so-called diaper rash. My 2-year-old voice said, no fection, yucky daddy, yucky daddy, yucky daddy. After that, in my mind's eye, the beautiful little girl that was me but separate, fragmented, vulnerably stood there, waiting for me, the adult, to respond to her. I felt a surge of love and protectiveness. In my heart, I took her into my arms, and I held her hand. Quietly, Kamra thanked her, the 2-year-old fragment part, for telling the adult, me, and promised her, the 2-year-old, that she was safe. On the session table, I was curled up in a fetal position on my side, still in the consciousness of being 2 years old. Somehow I could not recognize myself as the same person as that child, and the 2-year-old self remained separate. But now, by the beauty and simplicity of this little girl, she began to smile. She was happy to have told someone her pain. She was ready to be protected, and happily took my hand in solemn trust. I integrated the once traumatized little girl part. The self-realization and peace that came with this integration was like one solid brick being laid in my new foundation after the old one continued to crumble and be replaced with the truth, not only of my early life as a child in the Hare Krishna movement, but the truth of my journey as an eternal spirit soul. Realizations. The once joyous and carefree little girl was no more after that. Withdrawn and shy was she. Life was not a happy thing, but rather a duty to be trudged through with hard work. I left there feeling spent and shaky. My world was changed. I was sexually abused. Me. I was abused by my yucky daddy. I just want to pause here for a minute and say that I've always remembered that incident. It wasn't like it was a new memory for me. However, my continuous cognitive memory of that event from my early childhood when I was 2 had omitted the sexual abuse aspect of it. The feelings were all there. I just hadn't been able to go there, so to speak. I hadn't been able to admit it to myself, even though all of the symptoms were present in my body. But as I began to feel safe enough to look into the underlying emotional cause of the continued illness in my reproductive organs, that is when that body memory played out, and I was able to finally accept the truth that had always been there in retrospect, but that I had not allowed myself to accept because, you know, as a child, you're not safe. If you're in a environment where you're being abused and you're completely dependent on your abusers, you just simply block that part out. And the psychology is that you blame yourself for everything. Only many, many years later, when you're in a safe environment, does it happen that you're able to process what really took place there. And so that's what was happening here. And as I allowed myself to come into the awareness of this, not the awareness, but the acceptance of it, it completely shifted my the false narrative that my life was based on, that we were protected as children, that dad always whisked us away and in the nick of time, and that, you know, the family dysfunction came into very clear focus, and a lot of the pieces just fell together very easily after that, when I finally was allowed myself to admit what had happened. A lot of the other strange occurrences in our house also added up after that. And as hard as it was a relief, because the truth will set you free. Hare Krishna.